the Bitcoin ETF. Have you heard of it? Because if you haven't, where have you been? And take me with you. You're probably a lot happier than I am. But it's too late. You've clicked on the video. You gotta stay now. And I'm about to ruin your life by telling you all about it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Jess. And as the channel name suggests, it's all about crypto, trading, and technical analysis. So if you're all about that or you'd love to learn, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. So today's video is about the Bitcoin ETF, including 3 scenarios about what's going to happen if it gets approved, delayed, or rejected, including the price levels that we'll most likely see in any of those 3 scenarios. And finally, we're going to end the video on my overall market outlook for 2024. Alright, so before we dive into all those different scenarios of what even is going to happen, let's quickly go over what is a Bitcoin ETF. So an ETF is an exchange-traded fund, and that's exactly what it sounds like. Fund being a pool of assets, in this case Bitcoin, and exchange-traded meaning that you can trade it on an exchange. So different to it being, for example, an index fund where you can't trade, you can actively trade an ETF, the same way that you would with traditional assets, right? So you don't have to access, Binance, Bitget, BingX, CoinSpot, etc. Just to name a few. You can just do it wherever you trade your traditional assets. So it's a whole new avenue for people who want to access the price of Bitcoin and the benefits of trading or investing in Bitcoin without actually having to touch the asset. Because you don't actually own the asset when you buy an ETF as well. You only own the contract to it. You don't have to worry about things such as liquidity of the asset or even the safety of it as much, because generally the consensus is if it's on an ETF, it's probably safe to trade. So right off the bat, I think you can see how that's pretty positive news for Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market in general. And I think the news kind of hit the mainstream media around July. I definitely heard about it, I think, in the middle of the year. I was like on a bus to uni, and it was like my second semester. So I think safe to say most people should have known about it if they were going to find out about it by the end of 2023. And I think that was mainly because of one specific application that kind of rocked the crypto news community for a little bit, and that was the application by BlackRock. So for those of you who don't know, BlackRock is like literally the biggest investment company in the world, I want to say. They own like everything. They probably own like your house, to be honest. Like, yeah. So they put in a spot Bitcoin ETF, I think, early January 2023, and the final deadline for their specific application is on the 15th of January. But since their application, there have literally been hundreds of them, and one of them include one by ARK21 shares. And the final deadline for that one is on the 10th of January. So the general consensus is if the ARK21 shares application gets delayed or rejected, that will mean the same for the BlackRock one on the 15th. So overall, people are looking to the 10th of January as the final deadline date for approval or rejection of this Bitcoin spot ETF. Okay, so jumping right into January, the price action was pretty positive. We pretty much immediately saw a 10% pump in Bitcoin's price in, I think, about like it was 2 days. But since then, we've kind of reached a bit of a stalemate, and we've been sitting between these two price levels at 42,700. Oh, no, sorry, 43,200 and 44,300. So that's our parallel channel that we are currently traveling in. Understandably, people are leading up to this deadline really scared to take, longs, because it would technically be a very, very late long. And if the ETF gets declined, they would lose all their money. And if it is a short and the ETF gets approved, again, they would probably lose all their money. So it's a pretty big, risky position to be taking if you were going to take any long-term big positions, especially with such a big news event coming up. So as of right now, it is just kind of bouncing between these two levels, and overall volume volatility is very, very low, and I would expect it to continue to be so until this deadline or right before this deadline. Okay, let's really quickly start with the worst case scenario, a delay or rejection in the ETF. I think that's pretty obvious what's going to happen if that occurs. Right now, we are sitting in between these two levels of support and resistance. We would immediately break our level of support at 43,300 and probably see, at the very least, this level here, 40,700. The reason why I say that is because we already had a little bit of a taste of what would happen if the ETF got rejected from this little wick here. So what happened here, for those of you who don't know, a company called Matrixport, they released an article saying that their analysts believe that all Bitcoin ETFs in January would be rejected or delayed, and there would be no approvals until the second quarter. So they'd previously been a very, very bullish and positive company surrounding this Bitcoin ETF and their suddenly change of, I guess, outlook caused a bit of a stir in the market. It was really, really highly publicized as well. So naturally, people sold their Bitcoin and we saw this crash here. So that was a 10% crash, went to test that $40,000 level. And since then, we have not been able to break over our short time frame resistance of 44,300. So I would expect the same thing to happen at the very least for us to see a crash to $40,700. At that point, if we break below this and we test our $40,000 level, I would not expect it to hold because, as I've previously said in other videos, we haven't established $40,000 as a macro level of support because we haven't tested the next level of resistance. How that works is like, obviously you can't establish this as a level of support if we didn't have enough support at that level to even test resistance. It just kind of flew up and then fell below. That is what I would call a deviation. So if this entire move does not make it, we get a rejection, we will then have to classify this entire move here above this 40K level as a deviation. And if we touch below 40,700 to test that $40,000 level, we will fall and test $38,000 at the very least. There is a couple news places and analysts saying that we will see $32,000. As of right now, I feel like there's no point saying that until we see what happens here, because there's already 1, 2, 3 levels that we'll have to break before we even see $32,000 down here. But they are correct in saying that it would be the next level of support after this. On a macro chart, $32,000 is the next level of support. So absolute worst case scenario, if we do break that 40K level and $38,000, we will see $32,000. So there you have it. That's most likely what will happen if the ETF does get delayed or rejected, as well as the most relevant price levels. Now the next two scenarios depend on the ETF getting approved. The first one being slightly more negative, and it describes the entire ETF approval event as a sell the news event. So for those of you who don't really know what that term means, it's pretty common within the finance and cryptocurrency space. And basically, because price moves on speculation, generally upon the release of the news, everyone who bought or accumulated the asset during that speculation will use the liquidity of late entries to sell and take their profits. So that's exactly what people expect, or a lot of people expect to happen with the ETF currently if it does get approved. Let's quickly jump back into the charts so we can have a look at what kind of accumulation we've been seeing. So this is our daily chart on Bitcoin, and as you can see, I've drawn out this uptrend here, and so this is a 65-day uptrend that we entered in the middle of October. And so October is kind of when that ETF news became, really, really bullish. We were starting to get a little bit more hype in the community about it. Like I said, we did know about it all the way in August and July and stuff like that. The news had come out already, but this was when, the general consensus was starting to get very, very positive, especially leading up into that New Year period, December, as well, when BlackRock released their Bitcoin ETF ticker. I think it's IBIT. There was just a lot of hype in general on Twitter, X, in crypto news, yada, yada, yada. So, as you can expect, a lot of people would have accumulated their Bitcoin early on when these rumors had started to circulate that it was more likely to be approved than declined, and as per the term by the rumor seller news, would likely be expecting to sell when the ETF is approved around here. So, let's have a look. It's actually rallied around 71% since that mid-October period. So anyone who would have accumulated by then, I would definitely understand if they were ready to start to sell and take some of their profits. October is also when we had 5-year low levels of Bitcoin available on exchanges. And so what that means is that people aren't buying Bitcoin to trade it, but they're buying it for long-term investment. So these are the kind of signs that we see, before the bull market, but also when we expect very positive news. So people were buying it and taking it off exchanges onto cold wallets and ledgers, for example, and just holding it for, you don't really do that unless you plan to hold it for at least a couple of months to even maybe a couple of years. So those are all indications to me. There are lots of people who accumulated during this period and will very likely be looking to sell here. I mean, that's what I would do. I would wait for the pump to around this level here, our next level of resistance, and be selling, waiting for, the end of that dump and reaccumulating my Bitcoin in preparation for the halving event in April. I personally think that second scenario has a lot of justification behind it, and I really do see that happening, especially if there is an initial pump at the start when that ETF does get approved. I do expect us to break our current level of short-term resistance at the very least, and that's at 44.3 thousand, to then test 46,000 at the very least, which is our next level of micro resistance, that level between $46,000 to $48,000. So anywhere between there, if we do see a liquidity wick upwards, just to liquidate any shorts, early shorts, before we then dump, I can understand that too, maybe to $52,000. Again, it will just have to depend on what the market looks like when that is happening, but I think that's very possible. There is, however, a final and third scenario, and that is the most positive outlook, I think, overall, and that is that there will not be a dump in the market. It will not be a selling event. It will simply be a trigger for a lot of upwards price action, and that's just going to continue upwards. So this third scenario, the main justification behind the lack of a dump or any sort of like selling behavior that is enough to move the price action, is that there will be too much institutional purchases, too much institutional buying to, I guess, allow a downwards movement in price. So basically, you know, all of the institutional money that would be entering the market to facilitate these ETFs that get approved, because the general idea is if one of them is approved, a lot of them will be approved, and so a lot of institutions or those actors that are applying for this ETF will be buying and accumulating a lot of Bitcoin, right, to facilitate their ETF. And that is one of the main benefits of, you know, the ETF happening, is that a lot of money will be entering the cryptocurrency space and the market. But will it be strong enough to negate any sort of downtrend or any sort of selling behavior from the retail market? I am not sure. So the article that I'm specifically talking about when I'm referring to this is on CoinDesk. It's called "If Bitcoin So the specific article that I'm talking about is here on CoinDesk, and it's "If a Bitcoin ETF is approved, here's what may happen." And this paragraph in particular kind of summarizes that other argument really easily. And it's basically saying that the approval will require ETF issuers to purchase tens of billions of dollars of Bitcoin to satisfy the institutional demand, leading to a radical shift in the supply and demand dynamics. Some analysts even predict a supply shock after exchange balances fell to a 5-year low in October. A lack of Bitcoin on exchanges suggests holders are storing it in their personal wallets, a sign that they're less inclined to sell. So again, they're quoting this whole like 5-year low in October, but they're basically saying that the ETF approval news will not likely be a selling event for them. They're likely to just continue holding their wallets, maybe potentially to the next all-time high, or who knows, halving event, bull run, etc., etc. Who knows? And they're basically saying it's not going to be a selling news event. And there's a lot of sentiment on the line right now that's the truth, and like a lot of people believe that. There is a bunch of other articles, and it's all over X. But I just really don't think that, first of all, that much money is going to be entering the markets from these ETFs, at least at the start, because it's all dependent on the popularity of the ETFs. And I don't think, you know, there's hundreds of them that have been applied to, but I don't think many of them will be very successful, other than maybe the BlackRock one. That is the one that has the most hype right now and people are talking about and are most excited about. We would need to see literally all of them having mass amounts of popularity to generate that much money to purchase, like to have tens of billions of dollars of Bitcoin being purchased, right? For example, currently the price is at $43,900. So let's just round that up to $44,000. If we were to get a pump to $48,000, our next level of macro resistance, we need $94 billion to enter the market, right? So including retails and stuff like that, that's possible. We had reached a market cap of like 1 point something trillion, our previous all-time high, but I don't know if that ETF news is going to be enough to facilitate all of that movement and to eradicate any of the selling behavior of all of these people. I just don't know if that is a real possibility. I think at the very least we will see a little bit of pullback at resistance. I mean, that's only natural, right? To at least, not even if we might not even dump. I do think that potentially we might just see a bit of a slowdown, a little bit of consolidation. But I definitely don't think we're just going to continue upwards like this article is saying and like a lot of people are saying online. Okay guys, so those are 3 scenarios that are most likely to happen if the Bitcoin ETF gets delayed or rejected, or the 2 scenarios if it gets approved. So at the very least, we will definitely see, if it gets approved by the way, we will definitely see us break that 44.3k level. We will most likely retest our level of macro resistance at $46,000 to $48,000. And if we do get that test of $48,000, we might wick over just to liquidate early shorts and cross to $52,000, potentially $52,000. And I think it's only natural that we get a correction there. To what levels, we will just have to see. Macro support is $40,000, so we will definitely test that level if we continue downwards past, other levels of short-term frame support. But other than that, I just really quickly wanted to step away from talking about the ETF for a second. I feel like going into 2024, it was like all everyone really cared about. You couldn't go onto any sort of like news outlet, or like couldn't go on my phone without hearing about the ETF or reading about the ETF. I couldn't trade without thinking about the ETF. But the ETF does not determine the price of Bitcoin, like in a macro sense. It doesn't determine the value of Bitcoin. There are other things that do that. Especially in 2024, we have some really important stuff going on that I do want to quickly touch on before I end this video. So in 2024, there is a little bit of talk about interest rate cuts, and there isn't really like very clear information on when it's going to happen or exactly by how many basis points or etc. But just the fact that it's being talked about is really, really important, because as we've seen in October, the entire market runs on sentiment, right? It's not exactly about whether or not that stuff happens. It's about what people think is going to happen. And the fact that people are talking about these cuts or these potential cuts is important, because it perfectly lines up for a very, very positive 2024. Interest rate cuts correlate to, an eventual re-increase in inflation decreasing strength of the US dollar. As we've seen a pause in those interest rates, and we've seen a decrease in strength in the US dollar and a, coinciding rise in the asset market. S&P 500 reached all-time high the other day, and like Bitcoin's been going up, right? So the fact that we're getting an extension not only of a pause of interest rates, but a potential cut, multiple cuts throughout the year and leading on to 2025 is a very positive thing for the asset market. So I just wanted to really quickly end my video by just touching on that. Even if the ETF does get delayed, or even nothing happens, or if it like explodes upwards and it crashes like to God knows who where, it's not the end of the world. I would just focus on trading, doing reading the markets as it happens, and not letting all this drama of the ETF like get to you, because it's getting to me, and I just wanted to put that out there, like don't let it get to you. But yeah, those are my 2 cents. I think I'm going to wrap up the video there for today, guys. I will see you on the 11th, on my 11th, your 10th, if you're in America, of January, to talk about what's happened. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!